The Book of Boba Fett Chapter 2 gives us a way better episode than the first one and some of the richest Tatooine lore ever in Star Wars. We're going to talk about that right now. Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Star Wars Lads. It is the Book of Boba Fett, Chapter 2, the Tribes of Tatooine spoiler review. So if you have not watched the episode, come back as soon as you watch it, because we're going to dive into full spoilers, everything that happens in this episode right now. And yeah, this, as I said, the cold open, oh my god, this is so much better than the first one. It's really, I think Mr. Rodriguez watched this one instead of episode one, because there were big reveals in this. There were a lot of the plot was set forward in this, a lot of really great moments. And yeah, I can't wait to dive into those right now. But before we do so, please hit that like button down below, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you're notified whenever we release new videos from Star Wars Lads. We are going to be covering the Book of Boba Fett completely, with speculation videos that will be coming out later in the week. So you're going to want to stay tuned here for all the Book of Boba Fett over these next 7 weeks of the entire show. So yeah, and then comment below, let us know what you thought of the Tribes of Tatooine, what your favorite moments were if you didn't like anything, or what you thought of these big reveals in this episode. So yeah, let's dive right in. Okay. Everything about this episode is, to me, infinitely better than the last one. The last one, and that's not to say the last one is bad. I did get to rewatch it a second time, and it has grown on me a bit more. But I think as an opener, it does do a lot of the trudging of the exposition, setting us up. Where is this world going to be? How is this show structured? What does it look like? And I praised it last week for its immaculate costuming and set design. Oh my god, it looks insane. I wrote down a little note while I was watching the episode. I'm like, if they're going to keep showing us this many insane looking Trandoshans, please give us Bosk at some point in the show. It'd be criminal not to give us Bosk. Like that shot where he's walking to the mayor's office and all you see is the Trandoshans
Oh
looking at him.
yeah.
I was like,
Oh
oh,
yeah.
the costuming is so
God.
good. It's so
So
good. Their
good.
eyes look
So
amazing. It's incredible. So just right off the bat, the aesthetics continue. It's an incredible looking episode. The stakes feel a little higher. Boba feels a bit more in control. He's not as beat down as he was in the first one. We really focused in the first episode on him in the back to tank, and then he gets beat up by the Order of the Night Wind Assassins, who we get confirmed that that's the name of the order. He gets beat up there. He doesn't use his jetpack for some reason. He's just kind of a mess in the first episode. He's really getting his footing, and he's letting the mayor step all over him. Here he means business. He walks up. We get a nice Western type shot of his feet as he's walking up. We get the crowd looking at him. It's very Western-esque. Everybody's like, oh god, here he comes. And then we see the mayor meeting, so we've checked that off the trailer mark now. All of that was phenomenal. Then we get the twins that stand. I love the way the twins look. I love the hut design in this. Just the costuming and the effects, again, absolutely insane. Absolutely insane. And the mix of CGI. And then we get the big reveal, and I'll pass it to you for your thoughts on the big reveal of our first of hopefully many big underworld characters that are revealed in this. And it gives me a little bit of hope that we might get one more character who's in this circle a little bit eventually. And it is Black Chrysanthemum, or Chrysanthemum, however you say it. Black Chrysanthemum is here. It's if you don't know who that is, you're seeing a picture right now, but this is basically the bounty hunter Chewbacca, but much bigger, much more intimidating. He's got the crazy cool shoulder pads, and this character, I think it's really nice to see this, because finally we're giving some credence to these comics, and this character has been around since 2015. Like, this is not somebody they just made up and then they put in a comic like a month ago so that we would know who it is, and then now we get it. This is somebody who's been around for the entirety of the resurrection of Star Wars EU and canon, and like building this world in the novels and comics. And so for me, and this was so exciting, I jumped up in my seat. I was like, finally. And they did it. I was telling Sanak before this started, I scrolled through the entire credits hoping to see some type of confirmation this is who this is, because I think it would be a whole new level of just insane for them to put a black Wookiee in here that's about to enter with the exact same costume design and not make it Black Chrysanthemum. But I think I'm pretty safe to say that's who it is. What were your thoughts when you saw him in this
I
scene?
mean, it was just me saying yes, yes, yes. Because it's like you said, comic books dominate so much of film and television shows these days. But as much as we make a lot of these great adaptations and all that, there's a little bit of a slight bitterness to it because once the TV show or the movie blows up, that changes the comic. That becomes how the comic's molded, and it becomes a comic is an adaptation of the movie at that point or the TV show. So a lot of the original, really fun, fascinating things about characters and designs kind of get lost. Like if you look, for example, the original Guardians of the Galaxy, they're very different. They've had many different iterations, but the one that is very close to the movies, Gamora looks way different. I mean, the only person who looks the same is Rocket, basically, and I guess to a degree Groot. But their personalities are a little bit different. And look, it's fine. It's an adaptation. It's MCU. It's what works in the universe, what those actors interpret and bring out of those comics. And that's amazing. And they've been a fun group in their own right. But when you see something like the Guardians of the Galaxy video game, there's a blending of the movies and the comics. And it's like, okay, you can appreciate a little bit more of the original design, the concepts, their interactions, their relationships. So all that just to say Star Wars is not very friendly to comics or hasn't been. I mean, just in 2021, we had Bad Batch premiere, and that very first episode just knocked out the whole first issue of the Kanan series, which was one of the first ever canon comic books that we had, especially when Star Wars Rebels was like midway through. It was definitely finding its feet. It was before we had the season two finale, and Kanan was probably one of the bright spots of a show that was growing. And then that happens to replace it later on, a few years later in The Bad Batch, and you're like, "Well, yes, that's cool, that's fun, you can kind of interpret it in one way and all that," but you kinda lose a little bit of like, "Ah, man, like, I wish the comic book was there because the comic book had some really interesting stuff with the characters, with the relationships with the clones and all that," and here it's like, eh, right? But this is an example of a character that I think was just pulled straight out of the comics, who was comics only, who's got strong relationships to Boba, who's got relationships to Dr. Aphra, just has been in Star Wars canon comic books for a long time and has been growing as a character. He's got such interesting armor. So, like if someone else is wearing that armor, that would be shocking to me at this point. It's so unique. And they at least visually kept him the same. He's doesn't really talk in the comics. He kind of refuses to more often than not. And you can see that like knowing stare between him and Boba, right? Boba's like, I'm not intimidated. And it's like, yeah, it's like I've worked with him. I probably worked against him. I probably fought him. He knows who I am. I know who he is. In a way, I don't think Black Chrysanthemum knows to what extent Boba is like recovering slash damaged from the Sarlacc and all this and that. But there's that like there was like the first time in this show where I felt the respect for both the comic character and like the hype around a character which Boba has had for years and years, and just in that interaction. And I mean, the litter, the Huts, we've been hearing the litter, the litter, the litter, like probably 6 or 7 times, and we finally saw it. And we're like, yeah, well, that's the litter right there. Like when I heard twins, I was thinking maybe it's gonna be like Stinky the Hut, and like he's randomly has like a twin or something. This worked great well for me too. And we just saw the whole Hut console wiped out in the comics, so it's a nice little workaround where they're not directly contradicting anything that's been built up. So that whole scene was peak of the present day story, and I really loved the willingness to at least keep the majority of the comic book character and the vibe and its essence and bring it to live action.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was this whole again with this episode, it was more I want to say closer to about 60-40,
Mhm.
65-35, with the flashbacks dominating still over the present day stuff, the 9 ABY stuff. But it worked so much better in this because we had a nice little clear transition. We had a nice little split, and we had a nice setup and conclusion for both parts. It was like, okay, this is what's going on. And then now we're going to transition and finish a real arc with the secondary stuff. So I want to move on into the flashback because that is the majority of this episode.
Yeah.
And as awesome as the present day stuff looks, and I can't wait to find out the politics. I love that they use the word family once in this about like the crime syndicate. It is very
Oh yeah.
Godfather-esque.
Oh
They
yeah.
kept comparing it to the Godfather, and before it was coming out, the filmmakers, and I'm glad we get to see that now. We're starting to see that slowly unfold. I love the standoff, the Western style type thing that they do with the litter. It was all great. But yeah, let's get into the flashback, which does dominate the last probably 35 minutes of this episode. And this flashback, I think we both thought last week that the flashback was the best part of last week's episode, even if it was a little uneven the way they kept going back and forth to it. This flashback was great. It was nice to tie full circle. It was nice to see where they're going with this. I think it went in the direction I thought it was going to, but I didn't know like the exact logistics on how they were going to ultimately get to how this ends with Boba Fett basically officially becoming part of this Tusken tribe. And to see the Pikes as well, which was really cool, and just more underworld stuff to add to this underworld heavy show. I'm glad they're giving us all the imagery, and to see the Pikes without masks too is also something very cool. Another like train heist. This one more reminiscent to me is something like Breaking Bad than like your traditional Western train heist, but also still some of those elements. It was kind of a Westerny heavy episode, but I loved everything they did with this. I felt like even though this was the more predictable part of the episode for me, the episode where I could kind of see the end game as soon as it started, it was still really fascinating to see how it gets there. It was cool to see the Tashi Station confirmation, the Fixer and Cammy confirmations as well in the credits, all of that coming to a close. And also for me, again, more stuff to check off from the trailers. Like we're now
Yeah.
entering that part where next episode, I don't really know what to expect. We still have the meeting between him and the Trandoshans and all the seemingly families of Tatooine. But other than that, I don't know. So, but anyway, this part was great. What were your thoughts on this flashback sequence and some of your favorite parts from it?
I think in general, just the variety of experiences, like you said in the last episode, we start off with the flashback, and look, it's Boba Fett. We have to like see what happens with him getting out of the Sarlacc. I'm again a big fan of them accommodating to who Tamora Morrison looks like, and the fact that Boba Fett doesn't look like Tamora Morrison in the original trilogy. They clearly used a body double. He's in the Sarlacc. If you're being digested by a ancient worm of some sort, I don't think, regardless of what Beskar you're wearing, plates or not, you're not gonna be the same physically coming out of that. So it felt nice to like at least embrace who Tamar Morrison is right now. And he's still an extremely fit dude for being 60 years old. Like that's without a doubt. He might not be the guy who was when he was like 35 or something, but not many people are. So I like that they were letting his age show in a way that felt appropriate to the storytelling without hammering it home like, "Hey, he's an old man." Like, no, it worked there. But like you said, last episode's structure was weird because once we got past that, it was like, "All right, here's some flashbacks. Okay, present day story. Bam, bam, bam. All right, now we're gonna go back and finish up this whole episode with another extension of the flashback of how he gets, into a position of less of a slave and more of like maybe not a full member of the tribe, but maybe like respected enough to do something with him. He's done something that they all know clearly he pulled off, not the kid. Let's see what he's got. Like he's done something and he saved the kid too. So he's done something for the tribe, and it's our duty now to at least elevate him a bit. And that's what the story did because it's very much a symbiotic relationship. This is really his first healthy family that we know of in canon. Obviously he has his father. I'm assuming he had a decent relationship with Zam Wessel too, kind of like a motherly figure, but that's all traumatic earlier stuff that came very early on in his life when he wasn't really bounty hunting and all that. So those days can all kind of feel like the same over and over, other than when his dad comes and goes. But then after that, he's raised by Aura Singh for a bit. That's a horrible person to be raised by. His syndicate, the whole group is terrible, and she just leaves him for dead. Gets out of prison finally, and then he has his own tattooing syndicate, and they all were supposed to betray him in the Star Wars 1313 game, and I'm assuming that still happens. And they're all going their separate ways. Dengar and him are not friends, they're rivals of sorts. At least Dengar thinks he is. Like there have been people who've been killing him basically after his father has died, like trying to kill him again and again and again. So he doesn't have any family that he can say is by blood other than his father, and his father is just the original. He's the clone. So that there's a lot that like, screws with a kid's mind growing up when you kind of realize that. And then throwing himself into like wanting to be a bounty hunter and then go through all these terrible families. Yeah, he probably doesn't have like the best relationships with most people, but somehow in some way after being a slave to these Tuscans, he's now like in the group, and it starts off with them like really working with his like gaffy stick training. You know, I liked a lot of like the stuff with Mandalorian season two's first episode where they kind of use like Tuscan Raider sign language. It's not like our American sign language or anything, but like I liked how it's developing that he's learned that. So some time has passed, he's working through it. So love that training stuff. That female warrior, or at least coded as female Tuscan, was just showing him like, "Hey, you're doing the same thing as me, but you're not doing it right." And it was nice to see like he still had like this whole episode was just him taking that last step for that connection, for that test of who he really is, all those different things. And also setting him up for who we're seeing so far in the modern day story. Like we see the whole big part about it was like he sees the train attack and so many of the people he was around die, and he's like, I can do something about it. This is what my skill set has been used for. I'll do this. And then we get Tashi Station with Cammy and is his name Fixer or something, like
Yeah.
the original trilogy cutout characters from the deleted scene with Biggs and all of them. And Luke finally gets his power converters, whatever they may be. Um,
Yeah, I was really
yeah,
disappointed not to hear a reference to power converters, but
there
that
wasn't a
scene was
reference
still
to
really
power
good.
converters. I wouldn't be surprised if a power converter at this point is just for them a drink, but for Luke an actual physical power converter. Like I could literally see that just being like, oh, I wasn't lying, but it's different for some people, sort of thing there. And that was great. That's like, that's touching on like again, legends, how much of like Boba story is tied to legends, how great it is, and it's nice to kind of get like this legends connection in that sense. There was some original stuff with the train stuff that felt very reminiscent, like you said, of westerns and stuff like that, but also felt reminiscent of Solo: A Star Wars Story with the train heist. Maybe not as complicated or complex, but we do see the Pikes, and they're a pretty big player with Kessel and all that. And Kessel is plays a role here. That train heist was action wise was amazing. Like, uh, Jesus, like the cinematographer for this is forget his name. But he's a cinematographer for The Thing as well, John Carpenter's film. Let me find his name, Dean Cundy, and he's doing Book of Boba Fett, and you could tell with a lot of these camera angles, modern day live action and flashback live action, there was just a lot more different stuff than I didn't really see in Mandalorian, which I thought was very fitting of like this rise that Boba's going through. Um, that whole fight was great. Stealing the speeders from that crew that was spray painting the moisture farm home from last episode was great. Just assaulting them and then taking a drink and walking off and without a word said, and the guy just starts cleaning. It was great. Um, yeah, training them to use speeders, jump from them. There's a brutality to this that I don't think was even really in the first episode of season two, where like some Tuscans have died, but here, this is just like Tuscans who are just trying to get to cover and they're just dead. Or like they just got learn how to use a speeder bike and they crash and burn because someone shoots at it. Like there's a little bit more brutality here than the Mandalorian has shown. And I'm really liking the differentiation. Action scene on the train was great. The train conductor was like this weird, like spider-like droid, but also was like doing like it looks like it's powered in the same way that like at least similarly to pod racers with like the energy switching and the couples. There's just a lot of like steampunk kind of in there that was really cool to see. And then yeah, I mean that all that was great, but my favorite part was like when he comes back once the train like he sits down with the Pikes, he tells them like, "Hey, who's your leader?" "Oh, you know, Castle slave mines. I don't like that. I don't appreciate that. If you want to, go through these lands, you have to pay tenfold if you kill one of the Tuscans. If not, regardless, pay a toll. You could see him grow. You can really see Boba grow as like into the position of a leader as he is seeing in the Tuscan chief of sorts. Like Star Wars Explained had someone from a podcast kind of give a perspective of how like there's the kid, the infantilization that Boba kind of feels throughout the last episode. There's the female warrior who represents Boba like in his prime and seeing himself stripped of his prime, having to readjust to what that means, not being in that position. And then the chief who doesn't have to say much or do much, but has the respect of everyone, offers the water, and is just, right? And I thought that was great that they were building off of that. Even the kid had a little fun moment now that he's like admiring his idol that is Boba. The female warrior was great. The chieftain, well, the chieftain story is where it gets really weird, but really fun too, because a lot of Star Wars feels like it's very much pulled from Dune, and the Tuscans now more than ever have felt like the Fremen in Dune. And there's literally just like instead of spice hallucination, there's a lizard that he just snorts up into his nose in that scene. And I'm gonna stop there because I want to hear your thoughts because that when I saw that happen, I was like, what is going on? Yeah.
Yeah, I think I was a little concerned where we are going with the Tuscans because, like I said earlier, I was a little, or this episode was a bit predictable in that sense, where I feel like the Tuscan arc is going to be like, how he finds his footing. He's going to fall in line with the tribe. I was looking for the right word there, but this was the part that I really was like, okay, we're taking it to the next level. We're trying to understand not just Tatooine and these Tuscans, but the entire ecosystem around Tatooine. They reference former oceans before the sand. Like you start to learn the history of these people, and not just the history of this tribe, but this ancient history of Tatooine when it was once not a desert planet, once when it was a planet of oceans instead of sand. It hints at this ancient history that I found really fascinating. And then yes, the tree scene. I love that we're also getting more flashbacks to the Daniel Logan Boba Fett timeline as well. It gives me a lot of hope for a possible Jango Fett appearance in the show because we have Jango Fett. You might as well do it. It gives me a lot of hope to see more of that type of stuff. And yes, they never show this Daniel Logan stand-in face. They only show like a reflected image of the face on a window, which is very easy to do with computers now. So I don't know if they would go that whole step to do an entire scene of dialogue, but I think we're leaning towards possibly getting some more flashbacks of actual stuff in Boba's life, which to me would be really fascinating to see. See that idolization for his father, how it rubs off on how he leads, how his relationship with his father influenced his form of bounty hunting and who he is now. All of that would be really great. But yeah, I love this tree lizard sequence because it was really cool and it was nice and poetic to really come full circle with the branch he breaks off becoming his gaffy stick. And yeah, it added another layer to the mythology of what felt like such a standard movie cliche of a person, a lost person, becoming part of a tribe or a group of people who are also inhabitants of a place that has been overrun by some type of technology, and these people are forgotten and treated as people who are just left out to be shot when the train drives by, like that is their how the rest of the world views them. And I was going, okay, it's nice to give some humanization to these characters, but where's this next step coming with how it influences Boba in the future? And I think this tree scene, this this entire spiritual experience he has, is a way to connect him to the tribe way closer and way beyond just your traditional like, oh, he's done something nice for them, so now they'll accept him and he's proven himself in their eyes, because we've seen that cliche so many times in so many stories over hundreds of years.
Hmm.
And in this, it started to feel unique, and that's what I was hoping for, and they got me with it. And now I'm both equally excited to see what he does with these Tuscans as well as what he does in his capo Boba Fett's Dinio life in the modern
Yeah.
day.
God, no. I mean, I love like as he's walking, like first of all, he's like, Oh, I'm sorry. I swallowed your lizard. I love there's like that Tamora Morrison like humor is really showing off. Like there's a the whole Obi-Wan Django exchange is like, have you been to Coruscant recently? Possibly. Anytime recently? Perhaps. Like, yeah, it's good, but it feels a little stilted. It feels a little like, oh, like a little pompous. Here it just feels like a dude who's just like, oh, my bad, man. Like, there's a little dust, and then it felt like very like old man to more Morrison humor just seeping in, and it felt a lot more natural. But just seeing him, like you said, like we get the flashback of Camino, and then he sees like the sand turn into like waves. He's like swallowed up by the tree, but then he like flashes into feeling like he's in the Sarlacc. As he's walking, he's wearing the armor, the original armor. Like, there's clearly not a stunt double for this one because it feels like he's always felt like the guy behind the mask, but now he's been unmasked for so long. Like, what is that doing to him after you don that sort of armor, right? What does that mean to you? And I'm assuming even compared to Django, he's taken off his armor quite less. It feels like it's almost Mandalorian in that sense. Um, but yeah, it was just visually fascinating. And then he just comes back, and it just the chief opens up his little like coconut shell thingy of sorts, and then he just zips back in there, and he's like, "Oh, I thought that was also part of the dream." And I was like, yeah, it was spiritual. It was all those things. It was also just straight up like he was tripping on like spice and shrooms or something. It was religious. It was serene. It was chaotic. There was so much to it that felt like a mix of everything, and I guess that really is comes down to why I really enjoy this episode, especially more and more as this progressed, because Star Wars, like any good series, takes from other genres, takes from other stories from different cultures, and it's always been really great at that. Like, Star Wars has like a Hindu influence with like Yoda being an old Sanskrit words. There's a lot of like Buddhist and Japanese influence. There's so much Asian influence, so much African influence. There's so much just different cultures from day one in Star Wars. But now we're gonna see like a little bit of like that richness with the authentic development of these Tuscans to feel like, yeah, maybe like Fremen spin-off, but their ecosystem, their way of life, similar but different, richer, and showing potential for even more. And that whole final sequence is great. And Star Wars is at its best when it pulls from so many different things and creates something new out of it. And this felt so rich and authentic and new that I was like, yeah, nothing like I thought. And then right as it ended, when they're doing their whole dance and chant with the gaffy stick, the final part of their ceremony, and then you just hear the yeah, like the whole like Boba Fett chant, and I was like, yeah, okay, now this theme song is just hitting because now I really understand why that theme song is so great. Now I understand why that direction was chosen because so much of that Tuscan influence, the rise of his character, and yeah, and like you said, I want to see Jango Fett. I think it's gonna be more of like a hallucination sort of thing. Like he sees himself in his armor and then sees his father face to face instead of like a memory. I feel like the Daniel Logan thing, body double, is a little hard to pull off. That being said, who knows? We got Luke with a faked voice that was just completely computer generated. Who knows? It'd be pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, as far as an episode goes, that's the one that makes me go like, yeah, this is gonna be amazing. And now, we've only got 5 more episodes to go, but I feel like they're gonna all slap just as much as this one.
Yeah, I hope so, and I hope it continues in that direction. And oh my god, yeah, ever since now that you say that, I would love to see a face to face Tamora in both Boba and Jango's armor.
Yeah.
I want to see that, that parallel clone stuff. I want them to go into the clone angle. I don't think they will as much here. I think they're gonna save that for maybe a possible Boba Fett like Bad Batch appearance or something. But
Yeah.
there's so many levels to Boba's story that we can touch on so many different things, and the dual stories in this is now becoming more evident why it's needed and a lot more exciting, both of them.
Yeah.
I think the
Yeah.
flashback in the first episode like you said, it's exciting to see him crawl the Sarlacc pit. That's what we wanted. We wanted to see something of that nature, but never expected to get a dual story show like this. And it seems like both are going to be pretty epic. And I think eventually, we were kind of talking about this off camera a little bit before the show starts, or I mean, before we started this show. I think these things will all merge eventually, and we'll start to
Oh
get
yeah.
both timelines where we won't have flashbacks by episode 6 or 7. So yeah, anyway, Boba Fett chapter 2, the Tribes of Tatooine, significantly better than chapter 1. If you like chapter 1, you're going to love this. If you're on the fence about chapter 1, I think you'll at least like this show a lot more and be interested in seeing where it goes. We do get so many more hints at the actual plot of the show, who the villains are, what is the overall plan. And I think even though the twins were put in very ceremoniously, they weren't treated as possibly maybe the biggest villains of all. Who knows? But if you want to know, check out our speculation and predictions video that is coming out later this week. You're going to want to check that out. We will be talking all about our predictions and speculations for the Book of Boba Fett chapter 3 and the rest of the series as we know it after 2 episodes of the Book of Boba Fett. So thank you all so much for watching. If you haven't already, please hit that like button down below and subscribe to our channel for Star Wars content 3 days a week and a ton of Book of Boba Fett content. We will be covering the entire show as well as predictions, speculations, and anything else in between with the Book of Boba Fett. And then comment below, let us know what you thought of the episode, what you thought of the Black Chrysanthemum reveal, what you thought of the new huts, what you thought of the tribal stuff with the flashbacks, and how Boba Fett becomes a member of the tribe, and the gaffy stick, all that stuff, the train heist. This was such a huge episode that flowed so nicely and still didn't cram too much at us and gave us a lot of hope for the future. So let us know what you think down below. If you haven't followed us on social media, follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok at Star Wars Lads. And that is it. That's this episode. Thank you so much for watching. We'll see you next time for our predictions and speculation.